We compare ourselves all the time to people that just are on different callings and different walks. And Ephesians 4:1 is probably my favorite verse to just remind myself when I think, why didn't I get that opportunity? Why didn't I get to do this? And I would say the same for y'all. Is Ephesians 4:1 says, walk in a manner worthy of the calling in which you have been called. Walk in a manner worthy of the calling in which you have been called. And instead of us, sometimes we try to walk in a manner worthy of the calling someone else has been called in. Sometimes we try to run in a manner worthy of the calling someone else has been called in. And it can create exhaustion in our souls and in our lives. And one of the things I always wish is, what if Saul, when I started in the very beginning and talked about Saul and David, is what if Saul was secure? And what if Saul defended his mind? And what if Saul surrendered his life? And he was had no problems with someone else getting more praise, because he's like, my goal is to decrease so that God can increase. And if God chooses to increase the visibility of someone else, as long as God increases, and if it means I got to decrease more, I'm fine with that. And I always think, what if Saul was secure? What would have happened? How could that have impacted his life, his peace, his relationships? He wouldn't have this harmful spirit in his mind. He wouldn't be throwing spears. It wouldn't have caused division between him and his son and Jonathan and David. I think if he would have been on the same team, because many of us are on the same team and compare ourselves to people on the same team, then he wouldn't have. I like to think, this is conjecture, I like to think that Saul wouldn't have died and Jonathan wouldn't have died, because if you know, they died at war because they were in a different war. And I like to think, no, they would have been two armies together, David, Saul, and Jonathan. And so maybe Saul and Jonathan would have lived. Maybe Saul could have mentored David. Maybe Saul could have been, and Jonathan would have been his best friend during some difficult seasons. Maybe when Bathsheba was there, I like to think maybe Saul could have tapped him on the shoulder and say, hey, what are you doing? Like, what are you looking at? Or Jonathan could have said, hey, this is wrong, man. I know you too well. I'm too close to you to let this happen. I like to think that Uriah didn't have to die, that Bathsheba didn't have to happen, that wars and people that happen because comparison then has this rippling effect that maybe we don't always accredit to comparison, but that's where it started. And the impact was not even just on them, it was on all of Israel. And so I'm saying that a lot of our comparison may have way bigger ripple effect on our family, our spouse, our workplace environment,